It's 10 o'clock. This is Sky News at 10. Our top story. NHS health check. The Health Secretary pledges reform, but says 14 years of problems can't be fixed in one budget. Nowhere is safe. The UN's warning as it demands an end to civilian attacks after more than 80 die in strikes on Gaza. Tonight, explosions have been heard in Beirut after Israel said it would target Hezbollah's financial arm. Sir Chris Hoy's courage, the six-time Olympic cycling champion, is praised as he reveals he has terminal prostate cancer. Moldovans vote on whether to have closer ties to Europe amid fresh claims of Russian meddling.
I'm looking for a job, and I've always wanted to work at McDonald's.
He's loving it. Donald Trump dons an apron to make French fries great again in McDonald's. And we'll take a first look at tomorrow's front pages in our press preview from 10:30. Good evening. Amid reports of some cabinet ministers still wrangling over their spending power ahead of the budget in 10 days' time, the Health Secretary has told Sky News he's reached a deal with the Chancellor. But Wes Streeting has warned that it will take more than a one-budget settlement to fix all the problems faced by the NHS and that widespread reform is needed. Our political correspondent, Ali Fortescue, reports.
It's been a long budget build-up.
People looked at us, looked at me, and decided that Labour could be trusted with their money.
The pitch has been rolled, the final choreography is underway, and it seems the NHS could be a lonely budget winner.
I'm not going to get into specific figures. I've settled with the Chancellor, but we're not going to fix 14 years in one budget.
You've done the deal with her?
Yeah, the important thing for us is that, yes, we grip the crisis in front of us today, but we also make the right decisions now for the long term. Our focus isn't just on investment in the NHS, but reform.
But with money tied to reform, he'll need to bring NHS staff and unions with him.
He settled the junior doctors' strike and implemented the pay review body recommendations. There are issues at the moment with GPs. So, you know, it's never easy. There is more than 1 million people working in the health service meeting needs. And, you know, I talked about demand. You know, we have more people turning up in A&E departments than we've ever seen before.
The NHS may be boosted, but other departments are not so happy. As speculation mounts about how the Chancellor will fill what's now being briefed as a £40 billion black hole, some ministers have protested to the PM about department cuts that could soon move from the papers to people's pockets.
I would rather pay a little bit extra. I haven't got a lot of spare, but a little bit extra, so these things, and people can get paid what they deserve.
It's either eat or keep warm. I've got no time for them. I could do a better job myself, that's being honest.
They've got to put the money up or else the NHS is going to fall apart.
£7 billion reportedly to just keep the NHS standing still, a £40 billion black hole that the government say they need to fill. Can you just talk us through some of those numbers?
There's lots of different black hole numbers flying around, and actually some of them refer to quite different things. So I think the two big ones that are flying around are firstly the pressures on in-year spending. So that's the challenges this year, and that's the 22 billion. But really what matters for the fiscal rules, at least the current ones, is what's happening in the future, and in particular what's happening at the end of this decade.
It's worth remembering that the budget is still 10 days away, but what we're really seeing already is that uneasy dynamic between a squeeze on day-to-day spending and potential borrowing to invest. That tension between fiscal responsibility on the one hand and more radical long-term thinking for a Chancellor who, remember, built her pitch on growth. It's been billed as what could be the most consequential budget in a decade, a budget that could define the Chancellor and this government.
And Ali's live in Downing Street for us tonight. And Ali, as you say, the budget's some days away, but can we take it as read that it has actually been finalised now?
Well, my understanding this evening is that the final ring round with ministers, and remember, as you just heard, they haven't all been totally happy about the way the budget was going, has been agreed. So the budget, it seems, has been agreed. There has, of course, been plenty of speculation, be that about employer national insurance, inheritance tax, tax thresholds. All of those things, I think, have been looked at. I won't know exactly what's in it until closer to the 30th of October. But I think there's a sort of three-pronged message that sources in government are really trying to get across now. The message they want to get across on budget day. Firstly, they want to talk about the inheritance that they got from the Conservatives. We've heard plenty about that. Secondly, they want to talk about the need to grip public finances. And lastly, they want to look ahead to a kind of long-term vision. And it really feels from backbench Labour MPs I've spoken to who so far have towed the party line but are not totally happy that it is the latter of those they really want to see. They want to see a vision. What is it that this Labour government really stands for? And it feels over the weekend like we have seen a political choice becoming clearer, that in the choice between public services, health is really seen as a priority. And we know that tomorrow morning, the Prime Minister and the Health Secretary are going to be involved in launching a big public consultation about how the NHS is going to be reformed. But it looks like a political choice has been made here. What that will mean for other departments, well, we won't find that out till the 30th of October.
Indeed. Ali, thank you very much for the moment. To the Middle East now, and Israel has intensified its offensive in Gaza and Lebanon following the killing of the Hamas leader Yahya Sinwar. Let's take you through the latest developments. Well, overnight, Israeli strikes on the northern Gazan town of Beit Lahia killed at least 87 people, according to medics and Hamas-run media outlets. Israel argues that those figures have been exaggerated. Israel has been carrying out operations in Jabalia, also in northern Gaza, with fighting intensifying in the last 2 weeks. In Beirut, Israel said its air force conducted a strike today on Hezbollah's intelligence headquarters and an underground weapons workshop. Meanwhile, the Lebanese army says 3 of its soldiers have been killed by an Israeli strike on a vehicle in the south of Lebanon. Just across the border, Israel says 160 rockets have been launched into the north of the country from Lebanon by Hezbollah. Smoke has been seen rising from areas near the cities of Safed and Rosh Pinna after rocket attacks. Adam Parsons reports.
The frenetic aftermath of a deadly attack. In Beit Lahia, a city already flattened by this conflict, another dark day. The Gaza Health Ministry says well over 80 people were killed here by an airstrike on residential buildings.
It went on all night, tanks and quadcopters firing non-stop, missiles dropping, snipers shooting. They attacked us from every corner. We were surrounded, unable to move.
And on the ground, reports that Israeli soldiers rounded people up, questioning everyone, arresting some and expelling others.
They began interrogating us. They separated the men from the women and questioned us for 4 hours. Some people are still there. Some people have just been taken away.
What's clear is that there is a new phase in northern Gaza, a plan not just to degrade Hamas, but to remove them, to clear this area entirely. United Nations officials are exasperated and increasingly worried.
We cannot wait anymore because now we are into a very difficult season of the year and we may lose a lot of civilian lives, in particular because they're weak from under-delivery of humanitarian assistance and food aid.
Life here is going backwards. Aid can't get in, misery is rife, disease is brewing. Israel has launched more attacks on Lebanon, claiming to have struck a Hezbollah intelligence center in Beirut. Around 160 projectiles have come the other way into northern Israel. This fire raged in the town of Rosh Pinna, but many Hezbollah rockets are intercepted. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu spoke to Donald Trump on the phone and insisted that Israel alone would decide its next steps. And what Netanyahu wants is an absolute crushing victory. The end does not feel near. Adam Parsons, Sky News, Jerusalem.
Well, there have been explosions in Beirut tonight after Israel said it would target Hezbollah's financial arm. Our international correspondent Alex Rossi is there. Alex, what can you tell us about these explosions?
Well, certainly Israel's desire to deliver that crushing victory is continuing tonight. A couple of hours ago, evacuation orders were put out to people living near financial organisation affiliated to Hezbollah. This is the militant group that Israel is fighting in Lebanon. Now, in the last few hours, we have heard a series of explosions. There are reports that there have been many explosions. This organisation has 30 branches across Lebanon. You probably can't make it out, but there is an orange glow in the distance on the skyline towards the airport. That's where one of the bombs landed. We also know that hundreds of people have evacuated their homes tonight, joining more than 1 million people who've been displaced by this fighting. Now, this is an escalation because it is civilian infrastructure. Israel claims that it is used to finance Hezbollah. It is sanctioned by the United States and Saudi Arabia as well. So they want to dismantle it. They want to stop Hezbollah rearming. But certainly tonight, the picture here is pretty grim. This war is intensifying and this crisis is getting worse.
Alex, thank you. There are fresh calls for better access to screening for prostate cancer after six-time Olympic gold medalist Chris Hoy revealed publicly that his illness is incurable. The 48-year-old received his diagnosis in September last year. If it's caught early, prostate cancer can be successfully treated, but NHS testing is only available for men over 50, and campaigners say a change to current guidelines would save lives. Here's our sports correspondent, Rob Harris.
For Sir Chris Hoy, the pinnacle was London 2012. Celebrated by home fans, winning a 6th Olympic gold. A perfect close to the sporting career of a Team GB great. But now Sir Chris Hoy has revealed what he calls my toughest race yet. Cancer that cannot be cured. But still working this weekend as a BBC pundit.
How are you doing, Chris?
I'm doing well, thanks. Yeah, having a great week, some incredible performances and hopefully some more to come.
And among friends, it's been great to see so many familiar faces here this week.
It's always great to be back in the track centre, so many familiar faces, teammates, coaches, rivals. Yeah, and happy memories for me too from coming
Not expanding though on the newspaper interview, told of seeing a doctor in 2023 to check out discomfort in his shoulder and scans discovering a tumour. The second scan showed primary prostate cancer that had spread through his body. The announcement he was undergoing chemotherapy came in February, but only now disclosing a diagnosis received a year ago, having 2 to 4 years to live. He said, "There is medicine that I can take that will fend this off for as long as possible. As unnatural as it feels, this is nature. You know, we were all born and we all die. And this is just part of the process."
You happy with that?
The blood tests that could have detected it earlier are not widely available on the NHS under the age of 50. Despite, for Sir Chris, both his father and grandfather having had prostate cancer.
I think, you know, him going public and telling his story, I think, will help other men. And that's what I think the power of celebrity has, you know, to spread the word, get the message out that men need to look after themselves better. Having a PSA test done at a reasonable age, especially if you've got a family history, is a sensible thing to do. And what we look for with the PSA test, prostate-specific antigen test, is a rise in that PSA over time. And if the PSA is rising, that suggests there's a problem in the prostate.
In the depths of despair, Sir Chris able to inspire beyond the sport he dominated. The 7 medals won across 4 Olympics, now feeling overwhelmed by love and support, while concerned for his 2 children. Devastatingly saying wife Sarah also has an incurable disease, multiple sclerosis, also diagnosed last year. But Sir Chris Hoy trying to still feel fit, strong and positive. Appreciative he has time to say goodbye. Rob Harris, Sky News.
Counting is underway in Moldova's presidential election and a referendum on whether to join the European Union. After casting her ballot, the incumbent president, Maia Sandu, singled out the referendum vote as one that would set up the future of Moldova for many decades ahead. But early results from the country's electoral commission show that with data from 82% of polling stations processed, only 45.15% of Moldovans have voted yes, with 54.77% voting no. Our Europe correspondent, Siobhan Robbins, reports from Moldova now.
For these campaigners, an historic day. Millions of Moldovans on Sunday voted in a presidential election, an EU referendum, effectively making a choice between a future with Europe or Russia. Are you feeling confident, President?
Today is about Moldova. Everybody should go out and vote.
Arriving to cast her ballot, the pro-Western president. She backs yes, arguing adding the aim of joining the EU to the constitution will make it harder for pro-Russian forces to derail.
Today is about Moldova, and it's about voting for a peaceful and free country.
Russia's been accused of trying to meddle with the result and stop Moldova leaning west. But first-time voter Vlad believes their future lies in the EU.
There's a lot of benefits, better wages, better living conditions. I've heard a lot of people that say if the referendum doesn't pass, if my son doesn't get elected, they will just take their families and leave.
Just before the vote, police made arrests claiming 130,000 people had been bribed to vote no by a network linked to Russian-based tycoon Ilan Shor. Officers say millions has been pumped into disinformation campaigns. Moscow and Shor deny any involvement. In the northern city of Orhei, where Ilan Shor used to be mayor, many still feel closer to Russia. He's our friend, says flower seller Valentina when asked about President Putin. She and her husband are voting no. I'll vote against it. I've seen how people live in the European Union and I don't like it, Gregory says, adding life was better in the Soviet Union and he doesn't want to be ordered around by the EU. The final results expected to be confirmed tomorrow, but this vote's already exposed clear divides over where Moldova's loyalties should lie. Siobhan Robbins, Sky News, Moldova.
This week, another round of prisoners will be released from jail early to free up space as the government battles an overcrowding crisis. Sky News has heard from victims who reveal loopholes in the legislation for domestic abuse victims and others who are angry at the policy. We spoke to one mother whose baby was left with life-changing injuries after being violently shaken by a man who is now set to be freed early. Our correspondent Molly Malone reports.
This man took my child, basically my child's life away, and he is being able to walk free.
Ellie's little boy was just weeks old when he was violently shaken, left with injuries that changed his life forever. His mum says her child's mobility, his vision and ability to eat were all seriously affected. Daily seizures are now normal. The man who did it went to prison, but is being released early.
We're completely heartbroken. I feel like we've fought for justice and now the justice system is letting us down, let my little boy down.
The policy allows eligible offenders to be freed after serving 40% of their sentence to free up space in overcrowded jails. But Ellie, not her real name, says the government need to rethink it. If you were to have a meeting tomorrow, what would you say?
If I had a meeting with the government tomorrow, I'd give them half an hour of my little boy and say to them, this is the person, this perpetrator did this to my little boy. And you're trying to release him early. Just walk a day in my shoes. And then say that your policy applies to us.
This policy isn't about the offender, their history or their potential risk of causing harm. It's about the offence they were charged with and sentenced to. It's that makes them eligible for early release. But victims fear that means there are loopholes in the law.
It just shouldn't be happening.
Elizabeth Hudson has written to the Justice Secretary calling for change. Her ex-husband assaulted her and held a knife to her throat. While on bail, he attacked another woman and was sentenced to just over 6 years.
After years and years of trauma, I worked so hard to get to kind of a stronger place, and this has just come as a bolt from the blue and kind of pushed me right back to where I don't want to be.
Prisoners charged with domestic abuse offences are exempt from early release, but her ex was charged with ABH and threats to kill, not crimes which are specific to domestic abuse, so he's eligible.
There needs to be some way of registering, oh, it's an ABH, but it's not just an ABH, it's ABH in a domestic setting. Oh, it's threats to kill. It's not just threats to kill, it's threats to kill in a domestic setting.
These are stories concerning the Victims Commissioner, with fears that releasing prisoners based on their offence could risk clouding their risk of harm.
Myself, the Domestic Abuse Commissioner, is concerned about the level of violence that, hidden under assault charges, could escalate once again. There could be other victims, and they have carved out, sex offenders, DA and everything like that. But it really worries me under the assault, the level that they're missing, and hopefully nobody else will get hurt.
In a statement, the government told us they inherited a prison system on the point of collapse. They said it's been forced to introduce an early release programme to stop a crisis that would have overwhelmed the criminal justice system. The Lord Chancellor announced in July that she was scrapping the previous government's early release scheme, replacing it with a system which excludes several domestic abuse-related offences. But for victims, that will be hard hearing. Seeing their attackers get out early will be even harder, while they feel they're paying the price for overcrowded prisons. Molly Malone, Sky News.
Storm Ashley has caused travel disruption as 80-mile-an-hour winds and heavy rain hit the UK. We'll bring you more on that later in the programme. But first, a vigil's been held in central London for One Direction singer Liam Payne. Hundreds of the boy band's fans went to Hyde Park to pay tribute to the 31-year-old who died at a hotel in Buenos Aires. They gathered at the park's Peter Pan statue to sing together and lay cards and flowers.
I've been crying at work all day, every day. Yesterday was the only day I didn't cry because I just felt numb. I couldn't cry anymore.
Hurricane Oscar is expected to hit Cuba later as the country suffered another major setback to restoring power tonight, leaving millions in the dark. Cuba's national grid first crashed on Friday after the Antonio Guterres power plant, the island's largest, shut down, causing the biggest blackout in at least 2 years. Donald Trump has been visiting a McDonald's in Pennsylvania. It comes after the Democratic presidential candidate, Kamala Harris, has said she worked at the fast food chain when she was in college, a claim Donald Trump says is made up. The Republican presidential candidate donned an apron and made some fries.
Well, I'm looking for a job, and I've always wanted to work at McDonald's, but I never did. I'm running against somebody that said she did, but it turned out to be a totally phony story. So if you don't mind, I want to work the French fry counter. Absolutely. Okay, how much are you paying me?
He's loving it. The King and Queen have been greeted by cheering crowds in Sydney during their first public appearance on their Australian tour. Our royal correspondent, Laura Bundock, reports.
After a day of rest on doctors' orders, the King's Sunday in Sydney started with a service. Joining the congregation of St Thomas's, the area's oldest church. And then this moment, signing a historic Bible, which he'd previously signed with Diana in 1983. And outside, a first chance for the public to meet their king. Just don't call this a walkabout. In Australia, that means something else.
Really exciting, and I managed to say, "You're doing a good job, Charles," and he looked me in the eye and said, "Thank you."
Yeah, we said hello, and I gave him a picture of a kangaroo I drew.
I love them. I don't ever want to become a republic.
But not everyone agrees. Over the road, the banner and chants of campaigners for Indigenous rights. A warmer welcome here at the Parliament of New South Wales.
His Majesty, the King of Australia.
It's Upper House, Australia's oldest, celebrating its bicentenary, with an address from their king.
So with the sands of time encouraging brevity, it just remains for me to say what a great joy it is to come to Australia for the first time as sovereign, and to renew a love of this country and its people, which I have cherished for so long.
And from his parliament to his personal representative and an audience with Governor-General Sam Mostyn. This was the King's first public outing here, but with just 3 brief engagements, a short speech, a gentle start, setting a much slower pace to this quick tour. Across the city, we found the Australian Republic movement, not protesting, but having beers in a bar, with merch to match their message.
I think to be a head of state, you need to satisfy 3 criteria. 1, you should be from that state. 2, your allegiance should be unquestioningly to that state. 3, it should be a full-time job. And King Charles just fails in all 3 of those.
He's only here another 2 days.
Welcome back. Australia.
Yes, thank you.
Leaving fans down under, grabbing a glimpse and a g'day while they can. Laura Bundock, Sky News, Sydney.
And the Royal Tour has now moved on to the Australian capital, Canberra. Laura Bundock is there. Laura, what are the King and Queen Camilla up to in the day ahead?
Well, after that quiet Sunday, Monday here in Canberra feels a lot busier. So the King and Queen will arrive in the capital to formal welcomes. The first one by politicians and dignitaries. The second one perhaps more visual. They will have an official welcome to country with a smoking ceremony led by Indigenous leaders, very much to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land. They then make their way to the War Memorial here and to a second memorial, newer one, which is for the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders who've also served. They then go to the Parliament where the King will make that address. Now, the reason that's a significant moment is because you remember all those state premiers saying they couldn't make it to Canberra. That's the speech they'll be missing. And these set-piece speeches are always a significant moment for the King. There'll be a speech from the Prime Minister, the Leader of the Opposition too. And then the couple sort of go their separate ways. I think what will be interesting in the afternoon is seeing the King head to this research lab in the bush, which is looking at ways to try and find solutions to bushfires. Nowhere else on the planet has as many bushfires as Australia. And then they meet up again and join up in the National Botanic Gardens here. Australia is a country basically famous for its coastline, isn't it? And Canberra is this landlocked capital. But I reckon Canberra today will be doing its best to try and show off its beauty too.
OK, Laura, thank you. Time now to get the latest sports news with Joe.
This Sky News Sports Bulletin is brought to you by Vitality. Getting more people more active. Live life with Vitality.
So Gunther, new book, Gunther Steiner, Unfiltered. So I brought the swear box along, just in case.
Have you got some money? Or like to put the money in?
Not much. I haven't read the whole thing yet, but I did go to the end. At the end, you detail the phone conversation with Gene Haas, where he explains he's not renewing your contract. Now, that happens after a row between the two of you. Had you been more of a yes man, might you still have been in the job now?
Yes, for sure. If I would have just been always, yes, let's do this, let's not do this. But I couldn't see where the team is going by where he wanted to go. And that frustrated me, you know. So obviously, if I would have said yes to everything, I would be still there and be unhappy. So I'm gone now, but I'm happy.
In a way, you were at loggerheads. It
exactly,
makes sense.
Yeah, exactly.
There's been some litigation. There's probably not a lot you can say about that. But what about your relationship? Is there one anymore? You and Gene?
Well, you know the answer. There is not a relationship. No. Because people ask, what is the relationship? There is none, you know. Yeah. So that's the easiest answer, you know. So obviously, I don't want to get into my court case, but they sued me for the first book.
That's been dismissed.
That has been dismissed. So hopefully, it stays dismissed. But you never know.
Had you still been in the job, would you be enjoying the kind of results that the team are getting now? Can you be confident about that?
The car was made last year, and a lot of credit goes there to the team which did it, to Simone Resta, which now is of Mercedes, you know, at the time. I mean, we sat down last year in June and made the decision that the car was born in the beginning of the year. And I found strange beginning of this year when it was said, Us will be last, you know. It was like, I think you're wrong. So we were confident that the car will be in the midfield.
But in the virtual world, these two are definitely backmarkers. We're off. While we're on the subject of unfiltered, should drivers be filtered?
I cannot look at you at your swear box.
What do you reckon to all of this? Is Verstappen right to take a stand against the FIA for this punishment he's had or not? What do you think?
My opinion there is, I think what Max said in the press conference, was it right? No. Was it wrong? No. He described how he feels about the car, you know, which, and used the F word, you know. So obviously in the race you cannot, I think if you start to prohibit this in the race, it's almost impossible because the TV takes it out anyway with the bleeping, you know. So I think the penalty was too harsh, and what it started off, a big controversy about it. He could have dealt in a different way with it.
What about the style of leadership of the FIA president, Mohammed bin Sulayem? Is he too in people's face? Is he too confrontational?
I think sometimes there would be better ways to handle some of the problems there are. You know, it's like just maybe speak.
This Sky News Sports Bulletin is brought to you by Vitality.
Well, that was Sky News at 10. Coming up, we'll take a first look at tomorrow's newspapers in the press preview. Tonight, we're joined by former Conservative Special Advisor Henry Newman and political correspondent at Politics Joe, Ava Santina Evans. Amongst the stories we'll be discussing, this on the front of the Daily Telegraph, their headline. Reeves has warned changes to inheritance tax will backfire. Do stay with us for more. See you soon.
And now it's coming from both sides and it's moving this way.
Only about half a mile from the Turkish coast, and it's evident that the boat is seriously overcrowded. This is one of the most severe viruses in the world. I'm Alex Crawford and I'm Sky's special correspondent based in Istanbul. That's it got us then. There's a lot of action going on, a lot of hits coming in still. We aim to be the best and the most trusted place in news.
Clearly not had very much to eat at all, a lot of them extremely thin and very frail.
Look at her arms, I can put my entire hand round. This is the cocktail of drugs which the doctors at this hospital have been giving their coronavirus patients. Made for people who want clarity in an uncertain world.
Mother Nature can be vicious, absolutely savage. The world's largest falls now down to a trickle in places.
I can't imagine how much plastic is lying at the bottom of this huge lake. Whoa!
Close and personal with a rhino.
This is what makes the job so fantastic.
We've got your Sunday mornings covered. From the front page and the sounds of the streets to the voices of the people who make the major calls and big picture politics beyond Westminster. We'll put you at the heart of our story. A new start to Sunday. I'm ready. Are you? Join me, Trevor Phillips, Sunday mornings on Sky News.
The most significant day of this conflict. They keep telling us that they want aid.
And this is what's left of it.
Tanks, heavy vehicle.
Why only in America? People want their country to work.
Just want a job in a normal life.
Why are these homes empty?
I want you to be honest with people.
That has in minutes.
Sky News, the full story first. Free wherever you get your news.
I say, bring it on.
With America divided and tensions running high, get ready for an election like no other.
Join our teams as we follow the campaign trail as America decides.
We will win, win, win.
Get closer to the action this US election with full reaction and analysis.
Sky News, the full story first.
Welcome back. You are watching the press preview, a first look at what's on the front pages as they arrive. In the next 30 minutes, we'll see what's making the headlines with the former Conservative Special Advisor, Henry Newman, and political correspondent at Politics Joe, Ava Santina Evans. So let's see what's on some of those front pages for you now. The Guardian reports that Labour will unveil plans for digital NHS passports tomorrow. The Telegraph reports concerns that the Chancellor's planned changes to inheritance tax will not add extra cash to the Treasury. The Times says the government is planning to double council house building after it receives a budget boost next week. A former Defence Minister has told the Eye that the UK would struggle to protect itself from a missile attack. The Metro says 9 million people have been victims of a finance scam this year alone. The Mail highlights a new study claiming that hundreds of thousands of people could die from exposure to asbestos in Britain's schools. The Mirror leads with King Charles honouring Pride of Britain winners ahead of the award's 25th anniversary. The Express claims that 84% of pensioners will lose out on winter fuel payment cuts. The Star's warning its readers to watch out for beetles eating away their Christmas trees this year. And a reminder that by scanning the QR code you'll see on screen during the programme, you can check out the front pages of tomorrow's newspapers while you watch us. And we are joined tonight by the former Conservative Special Advisor, Henry Newman, and political correspondent at Politics Joe, Ava Santina. Welcome to you both. Let's start with the Guardian front page and this concept of NHS passports for all patients. West Streeting unveiling plans for portable medical records, giving every NHS patient their details at hand, but some concerns over privacy, Henry.
I think this sort of confirms that Wes Streeting is one of the government's most proactive ministers. I think it's, he's somebody who actually seems to at least have a diagnosis of the problems in the health service, maybe not a perfect diagnosis. I'm not sure he's yet got the answers, but he's somebody who's clearly trying to hit the ground running. And obviously the government's been hit by a variety of different scandals and buffeted by turbulence in Number 10 and the departure of Sue Gray. But I think Wes Streeting is saying, look, I've got a plan, I'm trying to do things, or what he's trying to say. I think passport's perhaps the wrong word. I mean, the whole thing about the NHS is that anyone can use it. Any British national has right to use it free at the point of care. But it's about data, and it's about making sure that your records can be available wherever you're being treated. I don't think it's a totally new thing. I think the last Labour government actually talked about a big NHS computerisation scheme. That went quite wrong in the end, and they ended up writing off a lot of money. So the idea has been around for a long time. I think it is a good thing to get the patient records in a better state, and we've got the NHS app that we all got much more used to using during COVID with our immunisation records and so on. But there will be controversy. People will be obviously worried about privacy, they'll be worried about scammers, and they'll be worried about data being sold off for research and so on.
But Wes Streeting saying that the details, the data would be protected and it would be anonymised information, so people needn't worry.
Well, I mean, you've said that he's the most proactive minister. You could also argue he's the most Blairite minister. He is really a minister who has been schooled by the Blairite Project. And, of course, they did try to introduce ID cards at one point, and there was some talk of that just before the election. So you can imagine that there may be some alarm bells ringing from people who are concerned about how their data is used and shared, particularly because the NHS has not been modernised for such a long time. I mean, if you speak to a doctor who works on any ward up and down the country, they'll tell you that a lot of the time they're actually fighting over one computer that's about 20 years old, So, you know, that kind of computer that's possibly using Windows 97, I'm not sure how comfortable I would be with that holding all of my data. And there's also this conversation about relaying your information over to private healthcare companies so that they can advance certain healthcare. I mean, that sounds fantastic in principle, but how can you be sure that the NHS is in a fit state to provide the sort of technology that really can keep it anonymised? The NHS has been hit before by a scamming attack. Who's to say it won't be hit again?
That is the worry, but the suggestion in sharing information with private providers is that those who, not just those who can afford to pay, would have access to treatment.
And he's had controversy elsewhere. He's, I think, been defending his plan to give fat jabs to those who are unemployed, and that's obviously caused a bit of controversy. I think he claimed he was not planning a dystopian future for the UK, which you know, I'm sure he would say that. But I think he is. You could call him Blairite. He's somebody who clearly wants to hit the ground running and is trying to get stuff done. And I think it's undeniable that whichever party was in power now, they'd be wanting to look at the NHS. We spend an enormous amount of our national income on this, and it clearly isn't delivering the outcomes that everyone would want it to be delivering.
This is also, there was a story yesterday in the Sunday papers where they were talking about where Streeting was announcing these potentially smartwatches that a lot of people would be able to wear, so that then the onus would be on the patient. Actually, you know, some of these health outcomes could be more
so more about preventative rather than waiting for the incidents to occur. Let's move to the Times inside, page 6 and 7, and this story about councils sitting on billions meant for homes and roads. How so, Henry?
Yes, so I actually worked in the department which was responsible for looking after local government. It's my last job in government, and it is a real challenge. Everyone wants to see more infrastructure built. People want generally to see more housing, even if it's not in their own backyard. They want to see new roads delivered. But actually getting this done is very challenging. And that's why I think it was a huge mistake of Rachel Reeves to come into office and talk on the one hand about increasing investment, but at the same time, some of her very first acts as Chancellor were to cancel a load of road schemes and rail schemes, to put a question mark over some of the hospital upgrades. I think that was a mistake. And I think it's interesting that you know, senior figures, both Conservative and Labour, have been saying, hold on, that's a really bad idea. These capital projects, these big investments, take a really long time to get going. And if you pause them or call them into question, it just makes it worse. And I think what this story is drilling into is the difficulty that local government has in actually getting money out the door. And I think the details of the article also draw out that part of the problem is because the budgets are very carefully ring-fenced into different pots, and you can't swap the money between them in the way that you could potentially with your household finances. And that makes it very hard to actually, if one bit gets hit by an unexpected delay, a bit of extra inflation in the cost prices, it all has a terrible knock-on. And that's, I think, part of the problem. And overall, as a country, we just need to be building stuff faster and more cheaply.
To the ordinary layperson listening to this, it sounds incredulous that the councils are having the difficulty spending the money. The research saying that more than 200 local authorities found that on average they had £19 million in unspent funds given to them by developers to pay for local infrastructure improvements.
But also, you know, I mean, as you've said, you know, that within councils, certain budgets are ring-fenced, but they have been struggling over the past few years, mainly because there hasn't been any social housing to put people in, and that's meant that they've actually had to absorb huge hotel costs for people. So there are people up and down the country who are living in hotels and have been living in hotels for a good couple of years, and that's taking up an extraordinary percentage of the council's budgets. I mean, I believe it is known, but I will happily be corrected. It's around 60% of their budget is going purely on temporary accommodation. But you know,
not sure so much. But I think you're right though that there's huge pressure.
Specifically.
Oh, Newham, sorry. But I think you're right. There's huge pressure, and I think it's exactly as you're saying. It just sometimes seems mad. Why can't you spend this money faster? And part of the problem is that we have all these checks and controls in place for the public sector. It's a good thing because we don't want to see public money, taxpayers' money wasted, but it also means it's just very difficult to actually get it all out the door, and there's a huge amount of bureaucracy and control. It is frustrating, but I think it gets to the core of a much bigger... It seems like a technical problem, but it gets to the core of a really big question, like why don't we have enough houses? Why don't we have enough new roads?
Let's move to the Telegraph, Henry. Take us into this story regarding inheritance tax and the plans that Rachel Reeves may or may not have for
Yeah, so
it.
the Telegraph, no surprise, is against changing inheritance tax. And I think the bigger point it's making, really, is that a lot of her planned tax raids actually look like they might backfire. So before the election, she sort of made a big deal of saying that she wouldn't touch the three main rates of tax: national insurance, income tax and VAT. She's now fudged that a bit on national insurance and is suggesting that she will touch that. But we don't know what she's planning to do around inheritance tax. It's a relatively small money raiser overall. It raises about £6 billion. It's not, in the scheme of things, that much money. It's not paid by that many people, but it's hugely unpopular. And I think the Telegraph is suggesting, at least, that there's a danger that if she goes after this, actually you'll just increase the number of ways that people seek to avoid paying this tax, and it won't actually get her the extra revenue that she so badly says she needs.
Yeah, economists saying that it's unlikely to raise additional revenues and hardly seems worth it.
Well, she's going after this agricultural property relief, and that could, you know, if successful, that could raise around £400 million for the Treasury. But then you've got farmers on the other side of that who desperately need to pass on their land because it's a family business and they're not, you know, squirreling away money. They actually, this is their bread and butter. So what she wants to do is raise the 7 years between someone passing on land until they die, that it's tax-free, and she wants to raise up to 10 years, which means that there's an extra 3 years in which the taxman is able to raid you for your tax. But again, as you said, you know, in total, economists are saying that all of this could raise around £1 billion, which is, I'm sorry, but it's sort of chicken feed, really, in terms of where we are with the Treasury. And that's only if it's completely successful.
This next story is shocking. Daily Mail front page. Hundreds of thousands of people will die from exposure to asbestos in Britain's schools. This is according to a new report that's out. And the Mail is launching a campaign to strip buildings, hospitals, schools of asbestos.
I mean, I think it's a great campaign to be running. There clearly is a problem with bits of our physical infrastructure, our homes as well, and we've seen more and more research recently about the dangers of living in substandard accommodation, substandard homes. There was obviously the tragic case of a boy, Awad Bishak, who died from black mould in his house. And I think that the Mail is taking this in a different direction now with a campaign about improving the physical structure of our schools, and I think that's broadly a good thing. I think asbestos deaths have come down in recent years, but it's still a total of about 5,000 across all different sorts of asbestos-related illnesses. That's an extraordinary number, and I think if we can find a way to reduce these figures, that'd be great.
Yeah, I was just going to say the figures that they're giving since 1980, at least 1,400 teachers and support staff and 12,600 pupils have died from mesothelioma, an aggressive cancer caused by, you know, inhaling the asbestos fibres.
We actually did a double take at that, didn't we, outside? Yeah. I mean, 12,000 pupils, that seems astonishing. And also, what I can't quite understand, we're in the shadow of the rack scandal, of the crumbling concrete scandal. It is sort of rather interesting that when constructing schools and certain infrastructure, that you looked at concrete that wouldn't crumble, or you looked at, you know, fibres that weren't asbestos, and you thought, no, we won't put that in the schools. That's absolutely fine. We'll just put it where the children go. It seems incredible.
I think it was obviously, they were built a long time ago and people didn't think about the dangers or didn't know about the dangers.
Yeah,
but I think the challenge again is it comes back to that question, where are we going to find the money to pay for new schools and how are we going to get them built quickly enough so that without, you know, all those problems of delivering big infrastructure.
Henry and Ava, thank you very much for the moment. We're going to take a break. Coming up, we'll be discussing this on the front of the Metro. Online con epidemic revealed with 9 million people being scammed. Do stay with us for more.
Prime Minister Modi is the most popular politician in the country. He is expected to win his 3rd term in these elections.
Jubilation in the streets, while some emotional.
This is a political victory for Prime Minister Modi and his Hindu Nationalist Party, a promise fulfilled. I'm Neville Lazarus and I'm Sky's reporter based in Delhi.
He paid over $50,000 to traffickers to get him to America. Instead, he was kidnapped, tied up, and threatened by smugglers. A commando from the state force walks me through to a Mai Tai village on the front line.
Firing to civilians and they're burning our house.
we cross to the opposite side, held by the cookies.
When they fire, we have to retaliate.
Sky News, get the full story first. Companies like these are helping India in its trajectory to be a serious player in space exploration.
The enthusiasm is palpable. The young desire change.
These elections are a pivotal moment for the country's economic and political history. The concern here is that the public healthcare system is inadequate.
In a prayer, she's asking God to help understand what happened. I cannot carry on. God, help me. He says his world has crashed. Like him, there are scores of families searching for their loved ones.
Too often have families endured such tragedies for the negligence not only by the administration, but also by spiritual people in this country. Free wherever you get your news. Even though it has few seats in Parliament, Kashmir is symbolic and very significant. It's often been called a nuclear flashpoint.
Our app gives you the very best of Sky News wherever you are. Breaking news, videos and analysis.
Evidence of the crisis.
Podcasts, watching us live.
Live here from Washington.
Wherever you get your podcast.
All in one place. And all at just the touch of the screen. The Sky News app. Get the full story first.
There's always more to the news than a headline. We want to discover, to delve a little deeper, to find out what's really going on. Explanation, analysis, the people at the heart of every story. I'm Neil Patterson, and this is the Sky News Daily Podcast. So, by the end, we'll hopefully all understand what's going on in the world just that little better. Available wherever you get your podcasts.
We've got your Sunday mornings covered. From the front page and the sounds of the streets to the voices of the people who make the major calls and big picture politics beyond Westminster. We'll put you at the heart of our story. A new start to Sunday.
I'm ready. Are you?
Join me, Trevor Phillips, Sunday mornings on Sky News.
Welcome back. You are watching the press preview. Still with me, we have former Conservative Special Advisor Henry Newman and political correspondent at Politics Jo, Ava Santina Evans. Let's have a look at this story in the Metro, front page of the Metro. 9 million of us have been scammed. This is a huge figure. People that have been roped into schemes, scammers posing as a friend in need, fake debt advice, pension or investment scams. That is a huge number of people that have been scammed, isn't it?
I mean, it's sort of, I think it's, at one level it's totally extraordinary, another level perhaps it's not. I think we all sort of know people who've fallen victim to a sort of online scam or a kind of a phone scam or something else. I think it's not a completely new thing, but it does seem to have been getting so much worse. And I think one of the terrible things is often they're related to some sort of offshore element of criminality, a gang that's based overseas, but the people who are scammed, in many cases might be elderly, not always, but they can be, perhaps not so much with online scams, but then if they are scammed, they end up feeling completely stupid and like you feel like you've been sort of outwitted by a criminal. But the reason these scams are so successful is because they're very good at doing it. And we look at these numbers are just appalling. And I think clearly there's a basic problem in the policing that they're not able to go after these scams in the right way. And there is a question about whether they've got the right resources to tackle serious organised criminality that's driving this.
And a lot of these are, perhaps smaller, petty crimes. So perhaps you might purchase something on a social media site like Instagram or TikTok, and then the product is never delivered to you because it's not a real company. And, a lot of this is down to regulation and tech. We just simply, UK legislation has not caught up with how fast I sound ridiculous. I sound so old, don't I? With how fast the internet is moving. But yeah, so the internet is really outpacing our legislation. And if you look at some of these scams now, they are extraordinarily advanced. I mean, I get texts from, companies pretending to be Royal Mail, and they say, we've got a package for you. And I go, well, it's quite possible you do have a package of mine. And
Exactly.
before I know it, I'm on the link and I'm out £5,000. Not really.
Oh. Thankfully, that wasn't real, but very, very easy to do, isn't it?
It is to do.
Very easy to do. Our final story is in the Eye, and this is another worrying story. The UK has a significant defence capability gap that means it would struggle to protect itself from a missile attack. This from a former defence minister. I don't know who exactly, because we've only got the front page, but worrying nonetheless.
I mean, it is, and I think it speaks to a kind of a bigger problem that's happening now. Clearly, there's huge political pressure to increase defence spending and improve the quality of our military, and that's being tested very aggressively by Russia. And I think people also looked at what's been happening in the Middle East and the success of Israel's Iron Dome and also related systems that have been able to shoot down ballistic missiles and other projectiles, and thinking, well, hold on a second, do we not need that here in the UK? That will obviously be very controversial, but I think there will be, whatever, in any circumstance, there's going to be real pressure to increase defence spending. It's something the last government was talking about. I don't think this government's been that clear on it, although Keir Starmer has been sort of lecturing other countries about the need for them to increase their defence spending. I think some people may turn around, and we may well have a President Trump in the White House who would be saying to Britain, come on, increase your spending.
During the election, Labour were sort of almost dancing around whether they were going to increase defence spending, and I do believe that Keir Starmer did confirm during one of the election debates that he would increase it, so we'll see that in the coming months. But a lot of it, I do remember actually this story first arising back in May, and it was from a provider to the RAF who first raised this idea that perhaps we do need an Iron Dome in Britain, and it did seem a bit of an opportunity for business perhaps for that provider. But, this is all off the back of actually quite a worrying story that RAF Typhoons were unable to shoot down ballistic missiles fired from Iran into Israel. So the question is now, do we have the tech capacity? Are we spending enough, and does everything need an upgrade?
The minister concerned, the former minister concerned, was Tobias Ellwood. But we have heard this warning many times in the past, haven't we, that we're not prepared, not fit for purpose.
Doesn't mean it's wrong, and I think that's the risk here. And I think Keir Starmer has said he will increase defence spending. I don't think he said by when, and that I think we'll know in 10 days' time. Rachel Reeves' overall plans for the economy, but I think I'll be very interested to hear whether she says clearly from the dispatch box in Parliament when she's going to get to a proper plan to improve defence spending and how quickly that will happen.
OK. Henry and Ava, thank you very much. We'll see you in the next hour. Much more coming up on Sky News at 11. The Health Secretary hints a deal has been done for more money for the NHS in the budget.
The most significant day of this conflict.
They keep telling us that they want aid.
And this is what's left of it.
Tanks, heavy vehicle.
Why only in America? People want their country to work.
Just want a job in a normal life.
Why are these homes empty?
I want you to be honest with people.
That has happened within minutes.
Sky News, the full story first. Free wherever you get your news.